Welcome to MedHeads, the weekly show that brings a biopsychosocial focus to issues of the day, along with special guests who will showcase their expertise and enthusiasm about their field of practice. Your host, Dr. Fergal Armstrong.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong and welcome to MedHeads. And today we're very lucky to have with us Tiffany Cherry, broadcaster, businesswoman and former physio. Hello Tiff, how are you?
Good morning, Fergal. Very well, thank you, on this sort of trying to be fine, sunny summer day.
Yeah, it's a Melbourne summer. Yeah, I can see the blue skies and the sun splitting the skies there. But thanks for joining us today. And we've had a chat before about your various passions, and I was trying to summarize in my own mind, what it is that you do, and I realized that I just can't do it. You are so varied in your passions and interests. And I suppose we've come up with a list of 4 things that we're going to talk about today. So it's health, the environment, gender equality, and sports. But to understand why we've come up with that list, I suppose we need to understand a little bit about your journey. So can you tell us how you started out in life?
Sure. Well, like all of us, probably the same. However, I grew up in a household very close to my dad, but grew up in a single parent household with my older brother, who was very much into sports, as sort of both my parents were, and so I just naturally followed. So that's where the love of sports developed, and we were quite a competitive family. So I am nearly 4 years younger than my older brother. So, and being a female, it was obviously I really had to step up to the mark to be competitive in any way, shape or form, of which I probably wasn't half the time. But so that's sort of where it's always striving, to be equal actually. And being the younger child, I found that I thought there was a lot of things that were unequal with our family, in that my brother got to do certain chores and I had to do what I considered to be female chores, which really riled me. And he was also allowed to catch a train to go and see my dad. And when the age came that he was going to do that, I was told that I had to wait longer because I was a girl. And so all these things, obviously it was just because of security, looking after me. But that sort of really planted a deep-seated dislike for being unequal. And so then the sports developed, and then sorry, 1 second. That's my dog. Rosie, come here. No, shush. And then the medical component of it. In my latter years as a sports person, I started getting injured in high school and secondary school, and then I started going to see the physio. And I remember taking $40, which way back in 1988 or whatever it was a lot of money, to see a physio, and all I could see was this cavalcade of sports stars walking in and out of the door. And I thought, wow, this is a great profession. You get paid a lot of money to meet your sports stars, idols. So I pursued a career in physio for a few years, but sort of realized that my passion, I found that physio, you're consigned at that time to a room treating someone, but I wanted to be out in the field, and I loved just being outside and being with people and being in amongst it, and developed a real love for journalism. And one day I was studying physio and I saw a female for the very first time present the sports news on Sports World, which was my favorite show. And I had this epiphany, and I said there and then that that's what I wanted to be, and spoke to my then boyfriend, and he said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, actually, I've got to finish what I started, which was my physio. My mum had always taught me to do that. So I continued and finished my degree, which is a great thing, because it really gave me a fabulous background into, and also a foray and a pathway into becoming a sports journalist, because back when I started, females weren't around. And so I was able to have a point of difference, which was my medical understanding of situations. And rather than, being told you're not a you're not a footballer or an ex-footballer, you can't, what do you know about the game? I was able to bring, medical understanding that 99.9% of the footballers until Jared Healy came along didn't know about. So that was how I
Yeah,
really
I can imagine that, talking about an ACL tear in an AFL player, it wasn't common knowledge back then when, so you were able to bring your medical knowledge to that.
Yeah. And so that's it. And then the environmental stuff really started post when I finished doing my full-time presenting with Foxtel after the Olympics. And I was looking to sort of really take a step into the business world, and I did an MBA on innovation and leadership. And then I met a gentleman who I was introduced to via someone else because I was looking to do potentially a legal degree, and then they sort of talked me out of it, and I decided to do this MBA, and then I did this board of directors course, blah blah blah, and I met someone who introduced me to the executive director of a group called C, which is the acronym for Sports Environment Alliance. So bringing sport and our environment together as an alliance, and it's all about protecting games and places where we play so that we have a future to continue to be able to play. And I just really, started doing obviously a fair bit of research and work in our environmental issues sort of long before, I suppose, the last couple of years when it's come to the fore. And that's just been a real passion of mine now, to be protecting our environment, and especially where we're headed, because it needs all the help that we can give it.
So from what I'm hearing, you've found your why, you find the reason, your passion to get up in the morning. So tell us about how you feel that health and environment go hand in hand.
Well, you cannot be healthy without a healthy environment, really. Eventually the two combine, and it'll seep, it's like osmosis, it'll seep into one another. So, when you think about all the health issues that are worldwide, and so many environmental catastrophes, the health of our planet is paramount to us being able to live a healthy life, to us being able to have water, and rich soil so we can build, so we can grow crops, and water so we can drink, and so our animals can be fed. And, that's a whole nother podcast really in itself to be speaking about from, our environment and all the different issues that we need to address urgently. But, I just think healthy body, healthy mind, healthy environment, it really, they all go hand in hand.
And I suppose it also speaks to the fact that the original word in Greek for gymnasium meant a garden. It was a place that you trained. And as you say, we take our world for granted, and if we don't look after it, we're not going to have a garden to play in. We're not going to have mental health. We're not going to have physical health, and we're going to end up with, nutritional and environmental diseases. So coming from your background as a physio, your view on exercise as a way or as a gate towards healthy living. Tell me about that.
To be active, and we learn when we're physio or doctor, when you do that medical component, your muscles need to be stimulated. They need, your bones need to have actually, pressure applied to them to be able to continue to be strong, for them to, when they regenerate, for them to rebuild. Your joints need to be lubricated. They need to move. And your brain needs to have that stimulus, and the ability to be able to feel free, and to, and to be able to give yourself a goal so you can attain that, and to be able to rest. Exercise is also very much about the rest in between, giving your body that time to regenerate, giving your mind that time to be calm, and to be able to refocus. So it's, the way the body works, and you and I both know it, it's, and the average person who doesn't study, hasn't studied what we've studied, still understands that you need to move your body, and you need to to apply pressure to it. To if you don't, that whole saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. So there needs to be a tiny bit of pain, or discomfort is more the word, for you to continue to maintain, a healthy body.
And, another phrase that I've heard used by physios often is motion is lotion. And, another phrase that comes to mind.
Yeah, the lubrication, of the joints, exactly.
Yeah. And safe but sore, there's another phrase that I've heard. That's a difficult phrase to communicate to sometimes to the general public, that pain doesn't necessarily mean damage, especially chronic pain. So let's move on to your obvious passion for gender equality. I mean, you were telling us a little bit about how growing up you felt that there was a certain inequality between how you were treated compared to your brother. And one of the things that struck me was that you said that to prove that you were as good as your brother, you had to be better. That's what I heard.
Yes.
Tell us about that. How does that influence your life?
It's funny because I wasn't really cognizant of saying it, but it's true.
Or maybe I just wanted to hear it.
When you break it down, it doesn't really make sense. But I always felt that because he was older, he was bigger, he was stronger, and he was a boy, and he also had this rite of passage, more or less, because of his, he was a boy, and he was older. I had to be as good as, if not better, to be recognized and noticed. And I think that transferred. I mean, most of the time I wasn't, but and I adore my brother, but that transferred into my school life, I suppose. I went to a school that he went to, that then became a co-ed school. So I was going to go to an all-girls school. Thankfully, I didn't. And I went to Carey Grammar in Kew in Melbourne.
Why do you say thankfully you didn't?
Because I wanted to be around guys. I wanted to be around boys, and I think it's such an important. I mean, each to their own. But for me, my development, life is this mixture of men and women, and now obviously transgender, and a whole variety of nationalities, and it's just this whole melting pot. And I think if you're around or subjected to just one certain type to a degree, then your development and your diversity and your understanding of your world can be quite limited. That's my take. So also, given that there were guys around me, I was striving. So I'd been growing up to strive against these boys, my brother, and so it was fabulous. Like, I loved the challenge. I loved being able to strive next to them, and so then that transferred into my working life, and then I chose to become a sports journalist, and then the first female boundary rider of the AFL, and I remember being asked, what's it like to be a female in the male changing rooms? And I was like, well, I don't know what it's like to be a male in the male changing rooms. I'm just in it. But obviously my background had always been that I was striving always to be acknowledged to be as good as I was. And I do recall every weekend I was working on a football game or a number of games. And I remember I used to print, which is terrible for our environment, but I used to print what I would refer to as half a tree. I would find every single article you could imagine on that game and on specific people and whatever. So I was really, really, really well-read and well-versed. And Bruce McAvaney taught me that. So there's a guy. A lot of my mentors are guys and fabulous men who really saw, opportunities for females as well. And I remember one of my bosses saying to me, my God, I didn't realize how much you prepare and how well prepared you are. And I just really, I remember that. And I looked at him and I said, well, I feel like I have to be doubly prepared to be accepted. And he looked and he nodded and he said, yes, you do. And so that was back then. It's not as much now, but I mean, you ask any female who's sort of breaking that glass ceiling, positions of power or authority or whatever, they have to from in Australia, Julia Gillard, she talks about it. You always feel like you have to be that much better prepared, or that much better than your counterpart. It's just sort of how it's been, really, to be acknowledged and accepted that yes, you are as good as, if not better.
So you were the first woman in the AFL. Your success hasn't you haven't sat on your laurels in that regard. You're now giving a ladder out to people behind you, women behind you, to try and join you. Isn't that right? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, if you sit on that sort of a generation's past and long go, you could say once I was whatever. No one's going to know or care, and nor should they, really, to a degree. So, no, I am really excited by helping people. I think that comes back to that caregiver, which is sort of why I initially chose being a physio, and and I realized in my in the days of my career where I'd sort of, I suppose, made it as a success, and and I was being invited to events, and I used to be invited to a lot of corporate golf days, and I realized a lot of my friends didn't have the opportunities that I was being afforded, and they were fabulous to experience, but I wanted to bring them along for the ride, and I also was very aware that I'd been helped. I'd put my hand up to be helped, and I had people like Bruce McAvaney, and there was a number of others, who reached out and saw in me a desire to succeed, I suppose, and they gave me opportunities. I still had to work hard for them, but they recognized it, and they and they helped to open some doors, and so I want to be able to do that for other women, and also I've helped young men, teenagers. Some are now in the industry, but really for females, I want to be able to give them opportunities that I know a lot of them don't get, and I know a lot of them, it's really hard still, but it's getting better, a lot better. But I want to continue to help accelerate that. And when the women's football started out, I was really, and I still think it's absolutely brilliant, but I was looking to really roll my sleeves up and get involved in that, maybe, in the business component of it. And then I had this idea that came to me. I've had my second epiphany when I was working at back at Richmond Football Club as their multimedia executive, which I just finished last year. And we had a local barista who would come every day, and he and I struck up a good friendship, and I'd go and chat with him, and he said to me, "I've got an idea for you," and he told me this idea, and I had this epiphany. I was like, "Oh my God, that's it. That's my next big thing." And then I sort of had, as soon as he said it, it was like this lightning bulb, went on, and all fireworks went off, and suddenly there was all these fireworks going off, and I had all these different components of this idea that just came to me, bang, 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 bang. And so I've got a business idea that I'm working on that combines my love for sport, for our environment, and for gender equality, and giving females, opportunities. And so that's sort of becoming my main focus now, but it doesn't pay any money. So I also, obviously have a job that I'm really passionate about as well. And eventually I'll sort of switch over into my own business, hopefully.
So your passion for gender equality and helping, especially women, up the ladder, the vehicle that you've used before is Women's United, isn't it?
Well, Women's United developed last year. It's a podcast. I've had it like yourself, so this is obviously a great idea, great podcast, and have had my own radio show and podcast as well. So this was one that people came to me. It spun off a men's version called Blokes United, which is hosted by Barry Hall and Sean Higgins, and also a guy called Richard Maloney, who's the brains behind it and the businessman behind it. And then he wanted to do a female version. So it's all about women helping women. For the men's, it was more sort of along the lines of mental health. Men, as you are well aware, find it a lot more difficult on average to talk about their the issues that are affecting them. So it was a sort of really safe forum for them to be able to just discuss whatever fun things, hard things, and a lot of a lot of us going through really difficult times during COVID-19 last year, and that obviously that continues. So, and so this women's version spun off, and I was asked to co-host it with a lady that I'd never worked with before, but she was the partner of a guy that I used to work with many years ago back at Richmond. So sort of come full circle, and yeah, we interview people, whether they be sports people or business people or bloggers or a whole variety of different fields. And yeah, it's a really great space, and I've never cried so much during interviews. And I don't say it, I'm not sitting there bawling, but I think it's just sort of really opened me up. And these interviews are just really genuine and heartfelt, and people take us to places that are pretty raw, and it's about finding that motivation and sharing that with the community that's listening and watching. It's really awesome.
I think that's a really important point to make, is that I think we underestimate the power, the therapeutic power that conversation has. Being able to talk about how you feel, it can be so healing. And as you've said, men are useless at it. And so, the fact that there is a forum called Men's United that can actually provide that forum is a great thing. But women are better at it, but still, that doesn't mean they don't need the forum. So the forum that facilitates conversations, that allows people to share their pain, actually on a humanistic level, is one of the most important ways that we can actually overcome trauma and develop and build up resilience. And as you've already alluded to, 2020 was a particularly challenging year. I mean, what can you share with us some of your experiences of how traumatic it has been for some people in 2020?
Well, you hear about a lot of people losing, their livelihoods. People committing suicide, and how this breaks my heart is loved ones dying alone. My brother had his second baby. He and my sister-in-law had their second baby, and they couldn't take their first child in to the hospital for however many days it was. I didn't actually even see my niece, until she was 6 or 7 months old. Now that happens when you live in another country, but that was just because the borders were closed. And so it's all those things. Personally, I, like actually a number of my friends, found the first part of the lockdown really good. I needed to slow down. I wanted a bit of time just to sit and still work, but just to get off the treadmill of life that I thought was just going crazy. And I've had this discussion with so many people, and they've concurred very similar conversations, actually, similar thoughts. The second one was pretty hard. More or less being under house arrest for however many months it was. I found it really hard with my daughter, who was 5. She's just turned 6, and so she had only me. And and I'm really active and got a young mind. Like, I play a lot with her and stuff, but in essence, I was everything. I was her teacher, I was her play friend, I was her parent, her disciplinarian, everything. And I saw her really struggle, for a 5-year-old to sort of start to go into depression for a couple of weeks was horrendous, and not being able to really do anything about it. I couldn't even take it to a playground. So, that's my story, or our story. I mean, everyone has a story, and for many people it was 10 times worse or more. But it taught us resilience. It taught us different ways. It taught us to do things better. It taught us that, yes, I believe there was a treadmill that we needed to step off. And before you step back on it again, what did we learn in that time when we sat and we thought and we processed? How do you make things better for yourself and for your family and for those around you and for our environment? And so it was a time perhaps we had to have. it's hard to say, but they're unprecedented times, and still don't know what's around the corner, and it just seems to be getting crazy in some parts of the world, as we know. So you just take it day by day, and yeah.
I'm not convinced that the vaccine that is now beginning to roll out in Australia and other countries, I'm not convinced that it's going to automatically return us to our lives such as they were pre-COVID. I mean, I think the impact on high-density housing and city living and city life, city business is going to be longer lasting than that. And I think, as you say, as you've said, you find, the first lockdown somewhat advantageous. I think there are people who have benefited from lockdown and people who have, of course, suffered horrendously. But I think that regions will be more attractive to people, and working from home will be more of an option for people in the future. And I think that will irrevocably change how we live and work in Australian society. And I think that's a tale that COVID's going to have. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not so sure. I haven't made my mind up whether or not everyone working from home is a good thing.
Well,
it's easier for me when there's no traffic on the roads, but
Look, I'd been working from home for a few years, or a combination of. I think a combination is fantastic. It's about, as a doctor, you prescribe everything in moderation. So working 5 days a week in an office, sometimes you don't need to be there. You can be so much more productive at home. Why not have 2 or 3 days at home? It allows you to be able to, especially if you're a carer, to be able to do the chores that need to be done, and have a proper meal on the table, rather than sort of snack food. And I'm not saying that people didn't, but it really stretched us. And then come into work 2 days a week for those meetings that really need to be face to face, and also for that social interaction, which is so important. So that's, I think, for many workers and businesses, it also saves you money. It also is less stress on our environment. How many people fly around the world, or fly to Sydney, or fly to here, or just for a meeting, when we've realized we can do it via Zoom or whatever it might be? I mean, how much are we polluting our world just for the sake of doing stuff because that's how it was done? I mean, anything that's disruptive is changing a system that's been around for a long time. And I think our system needed a big major upheaval, and it got it, not in a way that we wanted, but it got it, it was coming anyway, but certainly wasn't coming that fast.
Yeah, I can really only speak with any great expertise about the medical profession, and the impact of COVID on medicine has been significant, apart from, of course, the overwhelming demand for medical services. But it's introduced teleprescribing and telehealth, which people were talking about for years, but finally it's actually happened. And it happened very quickly as a result of COVID. But we've agreed then that the COVID has changed our world in ways that we would never have been able to predict. Do you think that COVID has or will change the glass ceiling that you so obviously struggle against on behalf of your other female friends and colleagues?
It was changing anyway, but I think COVID has done in pretty much everything across every industry. It's accelerated it, definitely, because it comes to a point where there's no BS. You know what that word is. So you just get on with it, and you just do it, rather than all the red tape and all the how come, why, then this and that and what. It's just like just step up and just do it. And so whether you be a male or a female, or whatever nationality, or sway, or whatever it might be, you just step up to the plate. And so by way of just situation, you just have to do the job. And so eventually then people's opinions of attitudes change, because they say, well, this person's been doing this for a certain amount of time and they've done as good a job, if not better. And when I studied my MBA, the innovation and leadership, we studied, this is really again, it's 2015, so the world's changed so much in that time. It was really a couple of years before the whole gender equality movement really got ramped up. And I think in Australia that was ramped up really by the AFL's decision to accelerate the AFLW to 2017. I don't think certainly didn't see it as that this was going to happen, but every other sport needed to pull up its socks that had women, otherwise they were going to lose them to AFLW. And then that sort of permeated again then into business, because obviously businesses were now looking at this opportunity, and then it was a major part of discussion, and then it was people started looking at, well, hang on, what about our workplace, and what about our place of education, and what about whatever it might be. But I really just see COVID as being the conduit for faster change. But the change has really been happening, I think, since 2017. And when I did my study, diversity, we studied the top 100 businesses in the world, and all of them, from ranked down from 1 to 100, had the most outstanding diversity policies. The way they treated their workforce was, back in 5 or 6 years ago, people were like, oh, you can't give the autonomy to people, your employees to work from home. You can't give them the autonomy because they won't work for you. They won't do the job properly. They won't. Well, we've just seen that people do. In fact, they work harder. If you give them that opportunity, give them that faith and that trust. So it was from my, as soon as I finished my study, I was like, well, diversity it's whether you like it or not, it's actually proven to be, to deliver the best results commercially, which is why businesses exist in the first place. They provide a service, but they provide a service to create money, for the shareholders. So it just
so what I'm hearing is
sense.
I'm hearing that diversity is commercially viable. It actually improves the bottom dollar.
100%, and it's incumbent on a board to not have a diverse board and a diverse, business structure.
Yeah. So Tiff, we've run out of time, sadly, but I really want to thank you for your taking the time to chat with us, and thank you for giving us your pearls of wisdom on such a wide array of subjects. There's only one adjective that I can use about you, and that has to be multi-talented. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Fergal. MedHeads, love it. And thanks for having me on board. I really appreciate your time.
That's it for today's MedHeads. My name's Dr. Fergal Armstrong. We'll see you next time.